Welcome to Starcanum, where we are obsessed with Star Wars Unlimited. I'm Ryan, and with me today is Gar Saxon. Not because I have a Gar deck, but because I wanted to share some of my tips to help you become a better Star Wars Unlimited player. And maybe then you can become the Viceroy of Mandalore. I don't know. Alright, so I'm going to split this into like two sections. First part, how to make a deck. Second part, how to play it. First of all, every Star Wars Unlimited deck needs a plan. And not just the concept of a plan. One neat thing about Star Wars Unlimited is how you get to pick a leader. And then you always have access to it, right? You don't have to draw it randomly out of your deck. And so you know for sure what turn you will be able to play that leader on. So let's make use of that. For example, let's say we are using Luke Skywalker as our leader. What is one of the best things we can do with him on a turn when we have 6 resources? Well, my answer for that is to play Obi-Wan Kenobi, a 6-cost unit who is a Sentinel that puts up a really big wall between our opponent and our leader. This sets us up for a really big turn, right? We play Obi-Wan, then we deploy Luke, and now our opponent is in a pickle. They have to attack into Obi-Wan before they can get to Luke, and if they don't kill him fast enough, we get to attack with Luke and put a shield on Obi-Wan, which makes him even harder to get rid of. And if our opponent does get rid of Obi-Wan, we get to put 2 experience on Luke, and since he's a Force unit, we also get to draw a card. So that would be a really great turn for a Luke Skywalker deck, but how do we make sure that happens? Well, start with the result you want and work backwards. For example, we could have R2-D2 in our deck because every time we play him or attack with him, we get to look at our top card of our deck, and if it's not Obi-Wan, we just move it to the bottom. That gives us way more chances to draw Obi-Wan before we deploy Luke, so they are more likely to hit the table together, which, again, is exactly what we want. R2 also works great with Luke as our leader because we can deploy him on the first turn and put a shield on him before our opponent can really do anything about it, which will keep him alive longer, which means more attacks, which means more opportunities to find Obi-Wan and set up that deploy turn exactly the way we want it. And we can, of course, use other Force units like Yoda and Kanan to back up our Obi-Wan, because what if our opponent has an answer for Luke? Maybe they use No Good to Me Dead, so he's going to be exhausted for a while. We want somewhere else to send those experience counters and get the card draw when our Sentinel Obi-Wan is defeated, so we might as well run that whole team together. But again, this all starts with the idea of planning out our leader deploy turn and working backwards. Another great example here would be a leader like Boba Fett, who can ready resources when stuff is defeated. So you would maybe play something, then defeat a unit, use Boba Fett's ability to ready a resource, then deploy him, then attack with him, then ready more resources so that you could potentially play up to 8 resources worth of stuff way ahead of schedule. And that is huge. I mean, imagine playing Overwhelming Barrage on the Toro you've got in play already. You get to spread out 5 damage, wipe out a bunch of stuff, you get 1 resource back immediately, then you deploy Boba Fett, attack, get 2 more, now you've got 3 more to play with. I mean, that can get you Greedo and Viper Probe Droid or something. I don't know, but you can really pop off on Boba Fett's deploy turn. You, of course, do have to build your deck in such a way to take advantage of that possibility. So, like I said, figure out what you want to do the turn your leader deploys and work backwards from there. Once you have done that, your next step is to figure out if your deck is heading in a direction that is aggressive or controlling or somewhere in between. So basically, every deck exists somewhere on this line, right? There are really aggressive decks that try to win the game as fast as possible, and there are controlling decks that try to answer everything an aggressive deck is doing and win the game on its own terms. Your job is to find your spot on that line and then own it. If you're making an aggressive deck, be as aggressive as possible. If you're making a control deck, have as many answers in there as you need to be ready for whatever your opponent tries to throw at you. So just real quick, as an example, if you're making an aggressive deck, you don't use Rival's Fall in there. Now, I know it's tempting to put this card into just about every deck that has blue because it answers everything. Every deck plays units, and certainly every deck has a leader, so why wouldn't we want this card? Well, the best way to deal with your opponent's units as an aggressive deck is to just remove the opponent, right? If you're just attacking them relentlessly, their base runs out of health, and then it doesn't matter what their leader was threatening to do or how big their Crate Dragon is because you've already killed them. But every turn that Rival's Fall sits in your hand, unable to be played, well, that's a turn that you could have been using those resources or the card you drew to play out more units and to press the attack. So in summary, I want you to pick your leader, identify their best possible deployment turn, work backwards from there to make that happen, then identify if this deck is aggressive or controlling or where it fits on the line, and then pick every card to maximize the effectiveness of your strategy at that point. Okay, so if you do all that, you'll be in pretty good shape because you will have a deck with a plan, and just working towards that should get you more wins. But what other advice does the mustache have? General tip number 1, trade up to win games, trade down to not lose games. What do I mean by that? Well, a trade is anytime my unit and your unit meet in battle and both get defeated, right? If I only spent one resource on my unit, like a Death Star Stormtrooper, but you spent 2 resources for yours, Battlefield Marine, then that trade was not equal, right? I got some extra value out of that because I have a leftover resource that I can use to play a second Stormtrooper. And over a long enough timeline, over the course of a game, if I keep winning those trades, coming out with leftover resources, eventually I'm going to win the whole game because I'll have more units on board, I'll be able to attack your base, do more damage, and that's just how it goes. So trading up will lead to you winning, but sometimes you will also have to trade down, which is when you use a better unit to knock out a worse one. And the times you want to do that, like I said, is when it prevents you from losing the whole game, right? Usually we're okay taking damage if it means that our units stay in and get to keep attacking the opponent. But if they are threatening to defeat us this turn, we might have to sacrifice our better unit and trade down if it allows us to stay alive and stay in the game. Okay, another general tip. We planned our ideal leader deployment turn, but don't deploy your leader on an empty board. That's mostly because of just one card, Power of the Dark Side, which can answer any leader if it's your only unit. Now, there is some other stuff you should watch out for too. I mean, ambush cards can always come out of nowhere, but generally you want to have at least 1 or 2 other units already in play so that when you deploy your leader, they can benefit from that, or they can be there to absorb or deflect attacks that are coming in from your opponent's side of the board and keep your leader alive a little bit longer. So yeah, just don't deploy your leader on an empty board unless you have like no other choice. Okay, next tip has to do with resources. I like to resource events before I resource units. The early turns of Star Wars Unlimited are so important, and you definitely want to set up a good field of units rather than holding on to an event that doesn't work without a unit in play, right? If I'm using that Luke deck from earlier and my opening hand has forces with me, that's gonna become a resource because I can't really make use of it until I've got units in play, and ideally force units. And ideally, I can make a good attack with the force unit that I've got, so it's gotta be ready. So there's a lot of conditions on that, and therefore, it's much better to just resource that for now and bank on the fact that I'll draw one of my other copies a little later on. Now, of course, the exception here is if one of those event cards happens to be one of the key cards for your leader's deploy turn, right? If you're playing Boba and you've got Overwhelming Barrage, it might be worth holding on to that rather than resourcing it because it's so fundamental to what you're trying to achieve on that deploy turn for Boba. So yeah, there's going to be some judgment calls there. Obviously, I mean, that's the whole point of the game, but in a very general sense, you should be resourcing your events before you resource your units. And that's not even taking into account smuggle or stuff like that. Just think about what each card's going to do for you and the best time to use it within your game, and you'll be all right. And my last tip probably could have been included in the deck building half, but I'm going to throw it in here. Don't play bad cards. And don't play two bad cards together just because they do something good. How do you know if you have a bad card? Well, if it is highly situational, probably bad. Something like look the other way. Not great, because most of the time your opponent can just pay the 2 resources to ignore it completely. But if you have created a situation where they don't have any resources left, they've probably also already attacked you with everything. And so trying to exhaust somebody just isn't really gonna save you the way that you're hoping it's gonna. So I would say that's a bad card. Other bad cards are low impact. Something like Smuggler's Aid, which heals you for just 3, isn't really worth including in your deck. I mean, I know you can smuggle it, so it's never really gonna cost you a card, but it does cost you an action and some resources, and it won't fix whatever problem got you to the point where you're almost dead enough that healing for 3 could win you the game, right? Like you're almost always better playing an event that actually removes a unit or powers up one of your own or lets you attack again. Almost any other card is better than Smuggler's Aid, so it's a bad card. And then finally, bad cards would be ones that fit your theme but not your plan. So for this one, I actually have a specific example because at my local store this week, I got to play with somebody who was doing something pretty creative with Sabine and running her in a blue shell that took advantage of the fact that she was a Mandalorian. So his deck still had Darksaber in it, but also a lot of other Mandalorian cards that would benefit from Sabine attacking with the Darksaber, stuff like the Armorer or Clan Ren Rescuer. All the little things were in there. And the idea was just to kind of swarm with Mandalorians and then use Sabine to kind of buff them up as they continued to put the pressure on. Now, that's not a bad idea, right? It can work. It can work even maybe better than some of the green Sabine builds that rely on Rebels. But there are still Mandalorian cards that don't belong in the red-blue Sabine Mandalorian deck. Concord Dawn Interceptors, for example. It is a Mandalorian ship, and it can be buffed up by Sabine holding the Darksaber or by Mandalorian Trooper or something, but like, it doesn't do enough damage. It's a very defensive card, and even though it fits the theme of the deck, it doesn't fit with the plan. You want to play cards that can attack well and maximize the damage you're getting off the back of Sabine holding the Darksaber and attacking for like 7 a turn. So yeah, avoid cards that are bad either individually or just don't work with what your deck is trying to do overall. And as for not playing 2 bad cards together to get a good effect, I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory, but it's a trap even I fall into from time to time. You're just not always going to draw both halves, or an opponent might interact with one half of that, and you're still stuck holding weird bad cards that by themselves don't do anything. So don't fall into that trap. Just walk away. Just play good cards that work with your leader, that help your leader have the best deploy turn possible. That is how you win Star Wars Unlimited. But maybe you've got some different tips of your own, or maybe you think my advice is bantha poodoo. Either way, I want to hear in the comments, so leave me some thoughts down there. And then make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the unlimited adventures we're having here at Starcanum. I'll see ya.